are now listening to the Gabba Gabba Hunt Talks podcast, where we bring you conversations with people connected to the Carolinas underground music scene. With your host, Mike Phillips of Van Huskins. All right, let's try this then. Hey, can you hear me now?
I can.
All right, good.
Sorry about that. I can be a little bit electronically challenged at times.
It was on my end. Like the reason I wasn't quite ready yet a minute ago was because it's been a while since I've done this and I didn't have everything set up. And all of a sudden I realized that I had my Zoom recorder set up as an interface and I don't need to do that for this. I just need to use it to record. Right. So I took it off, and then all of a sudden Skype didn't recognize that I had a microphone anymore because it was using that. And my webcam didn't automatically kick in, so I actually ended up having to switch webcams because the first one wouldn't work for whatever reason. Anyway, you don't have video. You don't have to have video. That's fine with me. But I was just letting you know I don't see the video.
I thought I did, but I guess I don't. So
yeah, whatever, that will work. I'm not sure if you can see me. I guess you probably can.
I can see you. Yeah. Nice Voivod shirt.
Oh, thank you. I saw him at Neighborhood Theater a few years ago, and it was a badass show.
Yeah, I was at that. I've seen him a couple times over the years, and, of course, not having the original lineup is different and weird, but, man, I got to say, they still bring it. And that new guitar player, I mean, he's just as good as Piggy. Yeah. And and that new bass player even is pretty damn awesome, too, you know? Yeah. There's just something about that band. And I think no matter who it is, if it's always just Snake and Michael, the drummer, it'll always be Voivod. Yeah. So,
and I never got to see him back in the day, so I was at least glad to get to see him then. So that was...
I was just, it's one of those things where like, holy shit, that's happened at the Neighborhood Theater. I got to go.
Yeah. me and Eric were the same. It was like, they might not be that good anymore, but we'll see. And, I was glad.
I had a feeling they were good. I just was kind of shocked that, like I guess we could get into later and during all this, but I just was shocked somebody brought him to Charlotte. Yeah. I'm always shocked when that happens.
Yeah, that's true. So it's nice to talk to you. We've never met before. Look forward to meeting.
I think we've been in the same room
we have
more times than I would probably could count.
Yeah, probably so. And we've just never met for one reason or another. But I'm talking to Gus Engstrom today, and currently from powertake0ff. But tell me a little bit about, because I don't really know anything about you. Tell me a little bit about where you're from and like how you got into music as a kid.
So I was born in Kansas, and I moved here in 1980, and which was kind of traumatic a little bit. So like, moving from the Midwest to like never thinking you may never see the ocean to all of a sudden being in a state that touched the ocean. Yeah. And going to the beach was a little weird, and the mountains. It was good, though. I mean, my dad worked for Pizza Hut, and he brought us out here. And, it was kind of one of those things where who knows where my life would have been if I'd have stayed there. But, I had a good childhood. I mean, I spent most of my time on a BMX bike, like most kids, raising hell, doing shit. Yeah. And until I discovered skateboarding in, like, 1985. Yeah. And that was kind of like the weird rabbit hole for me. Yeah, it is for a lot of people, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't think people give enough credit that Thrasher magazine was such a portal back then, because they had like the scene report for music. Yeah. So not only were you like looking at skaters, but you could also, it'd say the South. Well, these were the punk bands people were into. And then everything was locale. That's how I heard about the Melvins. That's how I heard about Neurosis. And so literally like about that time, like that was, I mean, I make the joke that I'm kind of the same person I was when I was like 14, but it's kind of true. I mean, I don't listen to any different music than I did then, and living up around here, I mean, I imagine you're from this area too. Yeah. It sucked in the fucking 80s. Like living in Concord and being a different kid was not cool.
I'm from Kings Mountain, so I grew up in a really small town, a little bit farther away from Charlotte. So definitely it was weird.
If you were into punk, different, weirdness. You were ostracized by all the kids that were redneck. You know, and like Andy Cobble, the people that owns Pinky's, he grew up here with me and stuff. And like John Marlowe, the drummer in town from like the Grave Rollers, he grew up with me. You know, it was just rough for us when we were just not like everybody else. And I was okay with that, but they weren't. And I don't know, I think you get a chip on your shoulder, you know?
Yeah.
You grow up like a little bit like it's us against them, you know? And so for that reason, I shunned pretty much every other kind of music. Like, if it was Pink Floyd, that was redneck music. If it was AC/DC, that was redneck music.
Oh, wow,
I didn't listen to that shit. And not till I went to college did I kind of like take a step back and appreciate it, you know, because I just saw that music blaring out of a Camaro with some dude with a mullet calling me damn names and shit, and never thought like, well, man, it's actually good music, and it has some redeeming qualities. I can't hold the music accountable because that dickhead listens to it.
Yeah, I kind of went a little bit the opposite direction. We I guess got into classic rock first and stuff like that. Then found punk rock, and once we found punk rock, then we were like, man, AC/DC sucks. Screw that band. But it was because of the exact same reason, because every redneck in Kings Mountain would blare AC/DC out of their truck, and it's like, we don't want to be like that. We don't want to, that's not the music we listen to. And then years later, of course, it was like, oh man, yeah, I love all that shit again.
Yeah. I mean, I totally made a flip flop, but it took me a long time to appreciate that stuff. And, you know, and I graduated high school in 1990 and I went to Kansas, back to Kansas. I went to the University of Kansas to go to school. And, that was like, it's a very fertile punk community. They had a place there called the Outhouse, which was like out in the middle of a cornfield. Yeah. And it was kind of like Kansas's version of the Milestone.
Yep.
Everybody played there. And that was just kind of a continuation, but even on a different level, because like William S. Burroughs lived in Lawrence, which is kind of crazy to think about. And, I don't know, that's where I spent like the next 4 years before I ended up back out this way. But, you know, all along I've just been, you know, going to the Milestone. And I mean, I remember when the International Club was over on Tuckasegee.
Yeah.
And there was a place called the Hall of Fame across the street. And, you know, I've been going to stuff, I guess, so long. And then, you know, now I just feel like the old guy in the room. And it's kind of weird. Like, I went to a show, I guess, right before COVID. Yeah. And at that skate park, that Oso skate park, and kids were dancing, and this guy knocked my glasses off, and I bent down to pick up my glasses, and he said, "Get the fuck out of the way, old man." And I'm like, well, I guess I am the old man in the room now. But I still try to go to shows and still try to be supportive. I don't know what's going to happen now after COVID, if what the scene is going to be, what it's going to look like.
I hope it looks a lot the same. I hope that the same venues are still there. I think they're going to need some help, but I hope it looks a lot the same. I think people, for the most part, will get back out to going back out again. I think there's still going to be some people that are probably forever going to be changed by this. In good ways and bad ways. But I don't really fear for, like, I don't think that the scene's going to die.
I don't think it's going to die. I think it's going to morph in a weird way. Like, I kind of hope. There's like a documentary called The Desolation Center that's on Amazon, and it's about when they started like closing all the clubs in LA in like '82. Yeah. These people started doing like guerrilla shows, and they had like shows in the desert. They had like shows on boats that went around the harbor of like San Pedro. Then they had like a show at Spawn Ranch with Sonic Youth. Yeah. They did all this stuff, and I kind of would like to hope that maybe things kind of go a little more underground again.
Yeah, it's possible.
Maybe like, I don't know, start like thinking outside the box, doing shows that are like non-traditional show spaces. You know, I don't know what that will be anymore, you know? Yeah. Because I mean, I stay pretty active on the internet, and I've read like, you know, in San Francisco, like Slim's is closed, and Bottom of the Hill's closed. And the High Dive in Denver, Barracuda in Austin. Serious big clubs are taking it in the backside. Yeah. And Charlotte is a big money town with gentrification, and I just don't know, because I don't see this ending, you know? I mean, I think there'll be another wave, unfortunately. I'm a guy that believes in wearing masks.
Oh, yeah.
And I live in a community where Concord and Kannapolis, they just thumb their nose at it.
Yeah, I see it every day.
Yep. And it's, and I don't know. I mean, and I know that then there's all those weird 20-year-old kids in Charlotte that I heard because I, talked to people that claim that they're not wearing masks either. Mm-hmm. So who knows what's going to happen?
I think we're probably in for a rough winter, and then we'll see what happens on the other side of all that.
Yeah.
That a lot of that depends on the vaccine and a lot of other things. A lot of it has to do with people's behaviors. And I guess I'm the same way. I've even thought about this. If something happens and all the clubs in this area close, we'll find a way. We'll find a way to throw shows. We'll have shows in backyards or wherever we have to do it. But I guess that part of me that doesn't want to see that is the one that wants to still see, the Milestone and Tommy's and everybody still be around at the other side of this.
I kind of hope what comes out of this is a little more compassion out of people. Mm-hmm. I've seen this town morph kind of many times now since I was a kid. And there's been times where the scene was very supportive of one another, like other bands. And I kind of feel like now it's not so much. There's a lot of, I don't know, kind of a bunch of islands, Like Raleigh is always a scene I've looked at that's always been very like self-supportive of each other.
Yeah.
And Charlotte has always kind of been a little cliquish and not so much a helping somebody out unless they're like a friend. And I kind of would like to think that maybe this has humanized everybody, and maybe everybody realizes we all are in the same boat and we can all help someone out in some way or capacity,
I certainly hope so.
I mean, I would like to think so. I mean, because Charlotte never has gotten much recognition for music, really. I mean, people forget when Morbid Angel recorded Altars of Madness, they lived here, and lived on Oakland Avenue off Central, and Buzz Oven lived here and basically like formed here, and Anti-Scene's Jeff's still doing it, you know.
Oh yeah,
and there's but then nowadays there's like Harvard toured a bunch, and Junior Astronomers toured a bunch, and Young and in the Way had a big impact till everything came to a close.
Yep.
And so I mean, but there's doing stuff, but this town has never really gotten. Not that it needs national recognition, but just even recognition at large.
I've seen that. I've been in the scene for years, and I keep saying the same thing. As far as the music goes here and the musicians, we've got great musicians. We've got, wonderful music coming out of this area, but we just don't have the support even from within our community outside of that group of friends that you were talking about, because we've got a group of friend bands that we play with a lot, but there's a lot more cross-pollination we could do if all the scenes would work together a little bit more and not be so cliquish.
Yeah. I mean, like when we were doing Horse Thief, which was basically my first band. for years I just booked shows. I never thought myself as a musician or anything, and it was just something I just slowly picked up on, messing around by myself, taking some guitar lessons here in Concord at Mullis Music. But Horse Thief was my first band. It was just kind of like, at that time, I feel like that was after like the early 2000s. Everything had kind of stalled out.
Yeah.
There weren't a lot of bands. We played with the same people every time. Kalabi Yao, and there was like a couple other people. And then Neil and them got the Milestone going, and we just played with the same bands. And so we made a pledge to ourselves that every time we played, we would try to bring an out-of-town band to play.
Yeah.
And that's how we lured Torch to town the first time.
Okay.
And Dove and whoever else. And just tried to make it an event, you know?
Yeah.
And I wish more people would do that, but it's a lot of work, you know?
It is.
And now I look at the scene and I think there's a gazillion bands, which is even harder to do, but maybe COVID is going to like strip it down to like quality, not quantity, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know? And maybe just because some people are going to be like, well, why do a band? You can't do nothing with it. You know, there's no end in sight of when you could play a show.
There'll be a few casualties.
Yeah. And some people, I think, look at it that way. Some people are just people who like to write and record, you know, and it's so easy to do that now with the technology. But, you know, I always have tried to make it an event. So I wish some people would do that. And it makes me mad when I see people not promoting, not making flyers, not trying, you know. I mean, it's hard to get people out these days.
It is.
There's so much else in the world going on.
It is, and then when you see a band that's been playing for years and they're still out there playing shows, but you never really know when they're playing because unless you hear somebody else promote it because they're not really promoting it, you're like, you know, you could pull your part a little bit. There's a lot of that in the scene. I've noticed. I guess they just expect the internet to do it for them.
Yeah, and the internet's a weird thing. You know, sometimes people have a real handle on it and sometimes people don't. And I don't know if I do. I mean, I'll be 49 this year, and I guess that kind of puts me as one of the older people kind of in the punk scene, so to speak. Yeah. Because by that time, people just sort of, they go do something else.
That's what I'm like. You know, I'll be 47 in February, so I'm not much younger than you. But I'm just, you know, me and Eric are still doing it. But I look around and I do see a lot of people our ages still out there doing it. But you know, the longer it goes on, the more those people might drop off, thinking, yeah, well, wasn't really worth putting this effort into it anymore if we can't really do anything with it.
Yeah, I mean, I want to do it right, you know, and I decided when, you know, Horse Thief was, I mean, like I said, it was my first band, and we did everything wrong.
Yeah.
We just kept playing shows. We didn't go record. Then we won a free recording session through Guitar Center, and it was a nightmare. And then I'm like, shit, this doesn't sound like us. We can't put this out. And so we were finally like, well, we should do something. And then when we finally did, we broke up.
Yeah.
And that was it. And so like I was like, well, okay, we just did everything the way you weren't supposed to.
All right.
And, you know, we'll just have to live with that. But, you know, I vowed if I did it again, I was going to do it right, you know?
Yeah.
And I really didn't know what that was. I mean, I messed around with this solo project called Snake Plissken with one S for a while. And never really got it off the ground. I guess I just couldn't get organized enough. And at some points, you just, you know how it is. Some days you just kind of feel like, man, it's a lot of work doing this. And I couldn't seem to get people together. And I never thought I'd join Grids, you know. And I did, and we did a lot in like 12 months or 14 months.
And let's back up just a little bit.
Okay,
so when did you first start playing an instrument? And so you say Horse Thief was your first band. Did you like dabble with any other bands or play with any other musicians before that happened?
No, I just messed around with guitar.
Yeah.
I mean, in the 90s, I was helping book pretty actively, like bringing a lot of stuff to the Milestone. Not the Milestone, but to Tremont when it first opened. Yeah. I used to do a lot of shows there. I helped bring some stuff there was like a short-lived club in the mid to early 90s called Heretics. Do you remember that?
Oh, I remember. My first band, or one of my first bands, Popes on Dope, and my first band, the Style and Johnny Appleseeds, we played there several times. That was like our home back in those days.
That was a weird, cool place, you know? And some weird stuff ended up there. Like, really, I mean, I saw stuff that I still am like, tell people, like, I saw Harvey Milk for the first time there.
Yeah.
And that was the night he had the anvil and the sledgehammer on stage and did that, and which he only did supposedly like a handful of times in their entire career.
Yeah.
But it happened to be there. And it was with Geezer Lake from Greensboro.
Oh, yeah.
And, but, you know, I was always trying to help bring bands to town, and Steve Munzel and I were really good friends.
Okay.
And so Steve and I would go a lot of places. Like, I went everywhere with Ooblish. Yeah. And we did a lot of stuff. And yeah, there used to be a house in Greensboro called Dick Street that was over near UNCG.
Okay.
And there was a lot of house shows then, and we went to those. So there was lots of late nights doing that. And through a lot of that stuff, I met a lot of the Raleigh people that I'm still friends with today. Yeah. Which I've always sort of really liked the Raleigh scene a lot. I always thought they kind of did it right.
I got that impression that so for the listeners, I do sort of know Gus a little bit, mostly just through doing the live stream, and he would request bands and stuff. But you know, I kind of got that feeling that you were very familiar with the Raleigh scene, just based on, you know, like Shiny Beast and Regraped and all those bands from that around that time.
Yeah, and Trucker. I mean, like when Penny first opened, like a couple friends of mine, we helped build the long ramp that went up the front of the building that you walked up. Yeah. For her, you know, she had that big room that was like 1,000 people, and we would always go, well, that's cool and all, Penny, that there's like 1,000-seat room, but like, let's say so and so wanted to play here and they only draw 100 people. Mm-hmm. That's gonna look really stupid in there. And she's like, well, what do you want to do? And so right there in the bar area, before they put up all those walls, we just set up right there in front of the bar. Yeah. And we did tons of shows there. And some of them got kind of big, and then that sort of made her realize she needed to build the Casbah. Oh, yeah. And needed to have a smaller stage with a dedicated PA, because we would take the PA apart in the big room, bring it out to the small room for whoever. Yeah. Steve and I used to do these like marathon Saturday afternoon shows where it's like, bring some cans of food, come check out bands.
I think the Accidents played one of those shows with Ooblish, and it was one of those all day bring some food shows.
Yeah, and we did like bring coats in the wintertime. Yep. I mean, Steve and I tried to do stuff, and it was kind of that moment where in the late 90s, right before Fat City opened, that things were starting to kind of build again. Yeah. And you could see that the music scene was sort of changing. I don't know if for the good or for the bad, but Charlotte was definitely changing too. Mm-hmm. And the kind of people that you'd see around. And, but yeah, I mean, forever, I was just all about booking bands and bringing people to town. Like, I used to go to Rock Hill a bunch, and Greg Ellis when he was in Salvo Rain. Yeah. And, you know, I was way into that, like, that underground punk scene big time. Still am to a lot of ways. Yeah. I don't know if it exists in the same way, but that's still kind of like, I guess, my wheelhouse when I talk about music and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I just dabbled with the guitar, and I don't know, I just was like talking shit with Mike Earl one day and said, we should start a band. We should start a band that's the loudest band in Charlotte. Fuck it.
I was going to ask who else was in the band. So Michael K. Earl was in the band?
Yep. Okay. And Tim Killow and Scott Wishart.
Okay. Yep. Need to get Scott on this podcast sometime. I probably need to get Michael on here, and Steve Munsell, and just about all these names you're mentioning.
Yeah, you need to get Steve, because Steve had like a lot of really epic house shows in the early 90s at his parents' house that still kind of hold up today. But yeah, I mean, Scott had only been here a couple years at that point. He was running Manifest at that time. Yeah. So that predates like him opening Lunchbox and stuff. And we just all kind of had this. We liked Carp. We liked Drive Like Jehu.
Yeah.
We grew up listening to like 90s Discord, like Fugazi, Jawbox, Circus Lupus, Nation of Ulysses kind of stuff. And we just sort of started a band like that. And that's kind of, I don't know what Horse Thief sounded like, but at least that was like sort of the mindset going into it.
Yeah, I was listening to it a little bit. I hadn't had a chance to really dig into it, but you sent it to me the other day, and I listened to some of it earlier, and I was kind of just noticing that it's not, you know, what you're doing these days is pretty much a natural progression from that. It's very in the same vein. And, you know, I kind of describe what you're doing as sort of like post-punk with like noise elements and stuff.
Right.
So it's very much Discordish, I would say. So
yeah, I mean, because, you know, like the way Scott sang and the way Mike sang, it was very much that way. And at that time, I mean, like I said, there was no bands around. Like that was like Choke the Rivers with Our Dead had broke up, which was like Lee Dameron's and Christina Fuentes' band. So there weren't like a lot of punk bands in town. And it just seemed like when we met Neil and Philip, they were like, hey, you want to play with this band? Hey, you want to play with this band?
Yeah.
Hey, you want to play with this band? So we felt like we were the house band at the Milestone.
Yeah.
And when it first opened it back up.
I'm surprised we didn't play a show together there, but our time back after Neil reopened the Milestone was sort of limited, and we only played a handful of shows. So maybe if we'd started a year earlier, I'm not sure where it all crosses over there.
Yeah, but this was like 2003 we got going.
Okay, so yeah, just a little bit before we got back together during our hiatus.
And you know, it's weird. It's like I don't remember how I met Philip, but I met Philip, and he was like, so, hey, we're doing these shows, and it was in this building over by the Fillmore. That was like 2 buildings down from the Fillmore. We played there once, and then there was another time right down on Mint Street past the stadium. We played, and you had to go down a bunch of long hallways to get into that room. We played there too, and then the next thing you know, I heard they had like leased the Milestone, and it just all seems like kind of a blur. But it was cool. It was an awesome transition. You know, the Milestone will always be, you know, my home. I mean, in the 90s, I still think that run that Penny had is kind of untouchable.
Yeah, it really is.
And I tell people, like, you know, you can say whatever you want about her. You can say whatever you want about the times. I don't know if it's even, like, comparable. I mean, you know, like she booked Swerve Driver there, and it was totally by mistake. And they pulled up and were like, what the fuck is this place? I mean, they were in a tour bus with a 20-foot trailer. Yeah. And they were used to playing at like the Fillmore. And then they pull up to this house that looks like it's been added on inappropriately. And they ended up playing, and it was amazing. But, you know, for that time, to get every AMREP band, every Sub Pop band.
Oh, yeah, I remember those days.
The Discord, the, you know, and just everything. I mean, and the Melvins on the Houdini tour, and Sleep, and Hawkwind. I mean, I just don't know at the end of the day if the bar was set really high. Yeah,
I was going to say that's not really a knock on who's, you know, on the Milestone today or when Neil ran it or anything. That was just, again, a really high bar. Yeah, and it's just, I don't know. I mean, but it was a good time. I mean, Penny ran a good club, and she was very fair. But, you know, that was back when it was so competitive trying to be a band. Yeah. And, like, what was it being signed anyway? You know, like getting put on a record label, you know? But that's what everybody was trying to do. There was money in it. Yeah. And now I'm not so sure. I think you have to ask yourself, if you're playing music in today's times, what are you doing it for? Yeah. Who are you doing it for? I do it for me. I don't ever, I mean, if 5 people show up, that's 5 more than I thought were going to show up. You know, because, I mean, we're loud and abrasive, and people usually don't stand up front. And if they do, then they evidently wanted to be there. Yeah. And then it's my job to make them hurt and then send them home with tinnitus. You know? Do my part for the community. But and I feel totally the same way about that. You know, if 5 people show up, that's 5 more than I expected. I'll play for 5 or 50 or 500. I don't know that I've ever played for 500, but I'll play for however many people. I'm there to play for myself. I want to have a good time and play the music that we wrote.
Yeah, and I don't know, Grids was a weird band for me because when I joined it, they kind of didn't really I didn't feel like they had their shit together.
Yeah.
But I saw a lot of potential.
Grids was a band, like a Charlotte band as well, so I'm not familiar with that either.
Yeah, so that was Rob Davis that worked at Lunchbox for Scott.
Okay.
When he at the first location.
Yeah.
And I don't know, they kind of reminded me of Young Widows a little bit. Piss Jeans.
Mm-hmm.
That was like 2008. They opened for Fucked Up. They opened for Thrones. They've opened for some good bands. And I don't know, I was at a point in my life, I'm a single parent, so I've raised my daughter. She's like 23 years old now.
Yeah.
And that had a lot to do in the late 90s of me not being in a band.
Yeah, trust me. I know, like, during my time that I was out of the scene, it was mostly because I was a father.
Yeah, and it was really tough to do Horse Thief for those 2 years, but my parents really were supportive and helped me do that. And my sister, who is now deceased, and some people in town know her from going to shows and stuff. She struggled like for 15 years with breast cancer, and she had been sick, and my dad had some health issues. So there was a lot of shit like bearing down on me.
Yeah.
And it all kind of came to a head in 2009. My dad just died, had a massive stroke, and it just kind of turned me up on end. And I just happened to walk in the Lunchbox, and Rob's like, "Would you want to play bass in Grids?" And I'm like, "Sure."
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, let's just jam and see what happens. And I ended up liking it. And after the first practice, I told them, I said, listen, we're going to have to change shit. Like, I just don't like this. And so I convinced them to tune down to drop C.
Yeah.
And so everybody in the band tuned down to drop C. And I said, yeah, and you guys can't play these goddamn 212 combo amps anymore. We got to get some damn muscle in here. So Rob went and found a Model T. And Rick went and found a Model T, and next thing you know, man, we had a band.
Yeah.
And I thought it was probably the best band I've been in, hands down. And a lot of shit happened super fast.
Yeah.
Like, I've never played in front of a band where we had a crowd. You know, like I always feel like I'm playing in front of my friends and a few stragglers. This was a band that actually drew. Then over time, we started getting some press and we started touring, and that all started to pick up.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was just that time in Charlotte or what, but I mean, we even played out of town and played in front of people and got a lot of really good gigs. And it kind of made me think like, well, this is kind of weird. I mean, but I like it, you know, I like playing in front of people. And it's just, I don't know. And then the fact that in 12, 14 months time, we did 2 LPs. I mean, I've never been that prolific. And a lot of people aren't because of everybody's life. But after my dad died, I was just kind of like, all right, I have got to start either whatever I do, just wholeheartedly do it. You know, my daughter was getting older. She was able to take care of herself a little bit. I kind of thought my sister was going to get better, but 5 years later, she ended up passing away. And so I've had a lot of loss in my life, which is probably why my music is not very friendly music. It's a lot of just me getting stuff out that I need to get out of my system.
Yeah, I love it. It's awesome, though.
But it made me, you know, just want to keep digging deeper and deeper. And I don't know, we just kept pushing grids. And, you know, we recorded with Kyle Spence of Harvey Milk. A lot of people don't realize this. I guess it was just so bizarre. The White Walls record came out first. In the, let's see, that would have been June of 2010. We recorded it in February with Bo White. 2 months later, we were back in the studio recording a whole nother record with Kyle Spence. All new set of songs, everything. And that became the Kansas record. And we started to shop it, but the economy was still shitty. And labels were like, oh man, you know, come talk to us next year. You know, we're in a rebuilding period. We heard that a bunch. And I know like Kyle gave it to some people and they got passed around, and we thought we were going to put it out on Learning Curve, which is out of Minneapolis, which is kind of a weird arm offshoot of AmRep. And, you know, I thought things were going really good. I mean, but those guys were young and I wasn't. I was in my late 30s. And for them, this was just like, I'll just go start another band. and, you know, me knowing this is lightning in a bottle and sometimes you can't recreate this. And the minute it stopped, you know, Rick went and started Young and in the Way. Rob went and started No Power. Bobby joined Double Negative. Everybody kind of moved on, and some things happened for some people, some things didn't happen for other people. I don't know. It was a big learning experience for me. That was like most touring I had done. Actually, like playing touring instead of, for years, I went out on the road with other people, helped out touring, sold merch, schlepped gear, that kind of stuff.
For any bands that you want to mention?
No, I mean, it was nobody big. But through that time, I became friends with a bunch of people. You know, like I met Cody from Murder City Devils and Big Business and Melvin's. I met him just by accident. He somehow ended up with my phone number and called me, and I booked that Murder City Devils show at Fat City that time. And just keeping numbers and passing people off and just going through the motions, you know? And it was just one of those things where I don't know. It's just like I try to use everything as a learning experience, you know? And I've always been a big Sun amp collector since like the late 90s. I guess I kind of got known for that.
I was talking to Travis Overcash, and speaking of, like, he was talking about how, like, when his father passed away earlier this year, he kind of got on this mission to play music. So that reminds me a lot of what you just said. But he also was talking about you and the Sun amps and how that all tied into what the band that became Star Motor Company.
I helped those guys out. And, you know, I mean, I've been very fortunate. Like, through a lot of stuff, through like Joe Preston, I met the people in Sun. And I've sold them a bunch of amps and helped them out at like Moog Fest one year. And then one year, Stephen O'Malley did like the solo gig of this big 4-hour drone session. And I ended up like supplying amps for that. So, and I've done like, you know, some stuff for Super Chunk at the Neighborhood Theater. You know, I've rented a lot of my backline out for people. I feel like music's my passion. I just never figured out a way to make any money doing it. But I guess we all are that way.
Yeah.
I never owned a club. I just always was the guy who was like, hey, so this band contacted me. You know, do you think we could get them in here on this day? And, well, how much money do they want? Well, we'll cover it. Okay, whatever. You know, only a few times did I have to, like, you know, dig into my pocket and do it.
Yeah.
That was always my arrangement with, like, Neil and Philip. I just sort of bird dogged it and brought bands to them, and then they booked it.
Yeah.
Which was good. It's just, it's, you know, it's a thankless job, you know, whoever you are.
That's why whenever we do work with somebody that books a show, you know, whenever I do my little thank you post after the show, I always try to make sure to include the person that booked it, because they really don't get a lot of credit sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I've remained friends with Philip all these years. And he's a lunatic, but I love that kid to death. But he went with us a couple of years ago. powertake0ff got asked to do this. Steve Albini started those things called the PRF barbecue, and the money's like goes to homeless, and they do some outreach. Well, they did one in Louisville, Kentucky, and I was just thinking, man, I haven't hung out with Philip. I said, would you want to go with us to Kentucky?
Yeah.
And he went with us for the weekend, and of course he didn't disappoint when it came to entertainment.
I love that guy.
Yeah, now he's off doing his own thing, you know, figuring out what he's doing. You know, just not wanting to stick around here. But I don't know. It was a crazy time. I mean, Grids was just one of those things, and then when it ended, I was just kind of like, seriously, this is over? God damn, I was just getting started, you know.
Yeah, and I said a minute ago, you know, I'm not real familiar with it. I was listening to it earlier. It's badass stuff. I'm going to be really digging into it later.
Yeah, and the records were kind of obscure. Like, there was this label out of New York called Ink Blot, and they were kind of a hardcore label. Yeah. And he somehow was into the White Wall. Well, he only knew about the White Walls record. And then when I joined the band, like I said, we almost became prolific. We were writing like there was no tomorrow. Like, it wasn't just going to practice. We were actually writing sometimes 2 and 3 songs a night.
Yeah. And
so, you know, to have 2 albums worth of material was crazy. Like, I've never been in a band like that before. You know, especially with that kind of music. And I don't know if you know Rob Davis. You know, that kid needs a lot of. He booked a lot of those punk shows, like 2006, 2007, 2008, 2000, and he was the one that brought all that stuff to town. Like, he's the reason Fucked Up played at the Milestone.
Okay, yeah.
You know, and he did a lot. I mean, he just did a lot. And there's always a lot of people that never get to do. I mean, it's, like I said, it's a thankless job.
Yeah.
You know, to do that. And I always thought somebody would kind of pick up the torch after Rob left, but I don't know. It's a calling, you know, and it's a lot of time on the internet now, and a lot of time networking, and a lot of people would rather, you know, nowadays with the way the world is. I mean, shit, who's got the time to want to be on the internet that much?
Yeah. and trust me, like you said, it's a very thankless job. There's not really money to be made in it. For people that care about that. So you've got to love it to do it. For somebody being in a band, you have to deal with that stuff enough. Like, so I don't want to pick up that torch because it's hard enough for me to book our own band shows. I don't want to be in charge of booking other shows for sure.
booking your own band is impossible enough.
Yep.
Booking a club, you know, I mean, and a lot of it was like, there for a while, it was like, listen, I can't book your band. I'm sorry. You know, like, I'm trying to book my band and you're trying to get me to get you a show on a Tuesday night. You know, never heard of you. You seem very nice, but I don't know what you want me to do, you know? And it's weird. It was like a fountain. And then someone's like, the next thing you know, it's like someone turned off the water. And then I don't get those calls anymore. Yeah. It's bizarre. When you're in it, you're knee deep in it. And when you're not, it's like it never exists. And I think for me, the older I get, the harder it is for me to book shows. Yeah. Going on tour, it's expensive. Like I did a tour in 2014 to Texas and back. Yeah. And we have a diesel, $4 a gallon for diesel fuel. Jesus Christ. I might as well have been working for the gas stations.
Yeah, that's something I'd still like to do, but I know that's got to be a ton of work because just booking a show locally is a headache sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you're putting a lot of trust into people, and the only thing I've realized, the internet's a really good tool instead of like calling people on the telephone and playing phone tag. But you sometimes on the internet don't really get to know a person. Yeah, and I've had way too many times where we've like gone somewhere, got there. And the dudes, I was like, hey, man, did you get those posters I sent you? Did you get those up? Oh, man, those are at my house, you know? And I'm like, well, shit, there's going to be nobody at this show. Yeah. And you get there, and there's like, you play for the bartender and the sound guy. Yep. And it's really hard to gauge that when you're just emailing and texting with somebody because it's so impersonal in a bunch of ways. But you'd think with technology it'd get easier. But I just think you're competing with so many bands.
You're competing with so many different bands, and just the technology itself, while it's helpful, it's also a distraction. So there's a lot of other stuff going on when people are booking bands. They're also doing a lot of different things online as well. So it gets a little less focused.
It is, you know, because, I mean, you know, it's weird because that machine is like shut down now. Yeah. And it's like, you know, when it starts back up, I mean, was everybody going to try to get back on the hamster wheel at the same time? You know, it's like, I don't know. Is that how it works? I don't know.
I don't really know because I've been thinking a lot lately about how we're definitely not ready to start playing shows again. But, you know, I'm already thinking about, I want to play a show. So what do? Do I go ahead and start trying to book something for, like, say, spring of next year, hoping that things are ready to go? Or does anybody even want to bother doing that at this point? Because I think there's a lot of uncertainty. So I think it will be kind of everybody gets back on the wheel at once, unfortunately.
Yeah, because like I've been anybody who like follows me on social media, I've been remodeling this house I just moved into. Yeah, and I've been doing it for like hardcore during COVID. And I don't know, in the summer I was kind of like, man, this sucks. Like I want to see some live music, you know? Yeah. And I got to thinking, well, maybe in the fall it'll be better. That was kind of like this entertaining thought that I had. Yeah. And then I was like, well, I've got this huge sunroom. Why don't I like book like Hex Machine from Richmond to come down on my birthday and blast my ears with their damn loud ass high watts and do all that. But then I'm thinking now, man, is that even possible? Yeah. Of course, if there's still restrictions and mandates, I wouldn't do it. I mean, I don't want any blood on my hands of that I facilitated something that got people sick.
Same here. As much as some people want to like move on and say whatever about, you know, we're maybe being too safe and all that, I'm not wanting to be the one to be out there going, all right, come see my show.
There's that band in town. I don't know if you've been a chance to see them yet. They're called Mutant Strain.
I've heard them. I haven't seen them yet, but I've heard their music.
They've got a record coming out on Sorry State out of Raleigh.
Yeah.
They're awesome. And all their shows are poorly advertised. Mm-hmm. And I've been to some houses over on Plaza where there's like 100 kids.
Yeah.
And I don't know who any of them are.
That's the thing is, I imagine, I always talk about how there's not really many kids in the music scene, but then I find out about a band like that, and I'm like, wait a minute, there's this scene that we're not aware of. That there's like house shows and these young, I'll say punk, but I'll use that term loosely because I know like some emo bands and stuff like that. They exist, and I've started hearing about them, but why do we not know about them? Why are they not playing, Milestone and Tommy's?
Well, yeah, like that. I know that band Acme. I'm sure you've heard of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they are part of that scene.
Yep.
I'd never seen them until I saw them at a house. There were all these kids, man. I was like, well, who the hell are all these people? I've never seen you at any of the clubs in town.
Exactly. So it exists. They're out there.
Yeah. And so then like Mutant Strain played with a bunch of like West Coast power violence bands at the Milestone one night, mm-hmm. and none of those kids came.
Yeah.
And I'm like, huh. So you'll pay $5 to go to somebody's house, but you won't pay $5 to come to the Milestone.
Yeah.
It was very interesting to me. But that's where it is, I guess, And Mutant Strain is really like pushing that real underground scene. That main dude, Tyler, you should talk to him. He's a really interesting cat.
Okay.
He's got a lot going on. I can send you his contacts offline and stuff.
Yeah.
And but I think you'd enjoy talking to him because he's kind of like has this scene going that nobody knows hardly exists.
Yeah.
It exists outside of everything else. Not that they're anti-club, but they really are DIY at to the bone.
Yeah.
And I get it,
Yeah, I mean, that's what I came from. So that's what, I would love to talk to him and say, it's awesome to see kids doing that.
He brings bands to town I've never heard of in my life. I went to probably about 8 or 9 of their shows, and some of them have been better than other. But he has a real interesting knack of just like existing on its own plane.
Yeah.
And which is awesome, in today's times. I mean, I hope they keep it up.
Yeah.
I mean, I just hope all these bands can ride this out, the good ones.
Yeah.
I guess time will tell, because I find it very interesting. I don't know how you feel with your band, but like promoting a band during the COVID virus is, mm-hmm. and you really have nothing to sell.
Yeah.
Is kind of an interesting phenomenon. like, does anybody really give a shit about me making a random update, or are they more concerned why all the information on the Breonna Taylor case isn't been made public yet?
It is like that sort of I don't know, balancing act you have to do, try to stay somewhat relevant. And we really haven't done a whole lot. We went ahead and released our EP after everything pretty much got shut down. It's like we didn't want to hold on to it until whenever we could play again. But since then, I've done a post here and there, but I really don't know what to do with it. I mean, I think we're getting ready to like put some merchandise online that people can buy. So maybe we can raise a little bit of money to go record. But even that, I'm going to feel a little weird about during this time.
Yeah. We had a kid that's in this band called Tongue Party out of Minneapolis. Mm-hmm. And he made us these, we're going to make these T-shirts, and they just have bolt cutters all over the front of them.
Yeah.
And it says fuck 12 down one of the handles, and down the other handle it says ACAB.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I saw that design.
And somebody, I thought I should make a post because I had a couple people put some weird stuff on the page, and I was like, listen, in case you're wondering, yeah, Power Takeoff does stand with Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And trans lives and opinions matter to Power Takeoff. Mm-hmm. And if that offends you, then I'm sorry that you probably need to fucking move on to somebody else. Yeah. And I had 4 people send me private messages that were like, fuck you, I don't want to have anything to do with your band. And I'm like, well, then fine. Yeah. If that's the way it's got to be, then that's the way it's got to be. I just wanted to make it very clear, if you had any inkling of where I stood, and all of my bandmates feel the exact same way. Yeah. I mean, Cody Hare that played drums for us, he was out protesting every night in Charlotte. I didn't go out there because I take care of my mother, mm-hmm. and I didn't want to pick up something. I was kind of paranoid at that time. I still am.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how you get it and how you don't get it. They still haven't told us a definitive answer.
But you're like me. If you got it and then passed it along to your mother, you would never forgive yourself.
Yeah, and so I just decided not to, you know. Yeah. And but it's not that I don't believe in what those people are out there doing, you know. I mean, I've had some friends say, "Oh man, I can't believe you're into this protesting," and I said, "Well, hey, I wish it was all peaceful. Who doesn't?" I said, "But you know, if some glass gets broken, glass can be replaced. Lives can't be brought back." You know, that's kind of my attitude with all of it.
Oh yeah.
So, but I mean, it's weird to make a statement like that from your band page for me to like, listen, I guess you've never talked to me before.
Yeah.
If you are a fan of the band, did you really think that I would be that way? Yeah. You know? But, you know, I guess sometimes you got to spell it out for some people, you know? And then some bands I've not heard one thing about. One post, nothing. It's almost just like they're just leaving it dormant.
A lot of those bands I think are the same ones that whenever they play a show, they don't really post too many updates about it. They let everybody else do it. But then there are some bands that are active like that have just, like you said, are dormant at this moment, I guess.
It's just, it's crazy times for sure. And I'm just, you know, trying to stay safe and be as, you know, smart as I can be about the whole deal, you know?
We took a little bit of time off when this first started and then decided to start practicing again. But I still feel a little weird about it just about every week when we go out there.
Yeah, but you guys are probably friends too. And that's a whole nother thing on top of that.
And really, other than, and we all go to work, but you know, we try to use our best judgment and just be safe about it. If anybody's ever feeling bad, we're not going to do it.
We lost, I mean, our guitar player was Nick, and he moved to New York City 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And so as far as like Power Takeoff's back to just kind of being me.
Yeah. Well, we haven't really talked about Power Takeoff at all yet. So how did that get started? And I did notice that. It all started with sex. This was our master plan. Born out of Lord's land, slave owners. So you see, we had a revelation from God.
So after the grids thing kind of just ended, those guys said, "Hey man, we're done."
Yeah.
And I was like, "What? We're done? I was just getting started, man. Let's keep the party rolling." And I had sort of helped foster this relationship with Learning Curve. Mm-hmm. And they had put out like the Hold Steady, that band from Minneapolis.
Yeah, I remember.
And like Gay Witch Abortion and Seahorse and kind of, you know, we're very much just a Minneapolis label at that point. And he was looking to sort of check out some other stuff. And I had to, you know, unfortunately make that weird text message and said, "Hey man, we broke up. I'm sorry." "Oh man, bummer. You guys sure you don't want to just put this record out?" They didn't want to do nothing.
Yeah.
So there it went. We made 3 pressings of 100 records in Kansas, and that's where it sits today. And I had started sort of like, well, thinking about this other record I thought we were going to do, and quickly sort of changed some stuff around, and that became that Plowshare song on that Butcher's Waltz comp.
Okay.
And so I decided, you know what, man, I got nothing to lose. I'm just going to send it to them and say, listen. So I kind of got this, and this is all I got. It's a 10-minute song, and they were like, "Do you have a record?" And I was like, "No, I have a 10-minute song, and I'm just sharing with you what I got." And they were like, "Would you want to be on this compilation?" Well, sure, but let me preface that I'm not a band. Like, I did all this stuff with the help of Rick Contes of Young and in the Way.
Yeah.
He said, and they were like, "Oh, okay, yeah, no big deal." So I just figured I put this song on this comp. It was something to do, see what happens, sell a few records. The comp sells out in like weeks.
Yeah.
Because Gay Witch Abortion has a presence. Seahorse has a presence. They're on AMREP. And Skull Kodiak is the Cows people.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, it wasn't me selling the record, it was them selling the record. And so it was out there. And, you know, that was in like the summer of 2011, maybe? Yeah. And 2012 rolls around at the beginning of the year, and Reiner's like, hey, man, could you put a band together and write some more songs? I was like, I don't know, maybe. I can see what I could do. He's like, well, I'm going to do a South by Southwest showcase if you want to come play.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, okay, so now I've got something to work for. Yeah. So I called my friend Matt, who lived in that time in Richmond. He used to be in this band Moonshine. And he came down, and we just sort of clicked. Mm-hmm. Like, him and I share the love of this band called Brain Bombs that are from Sweden. We just sort of clicked and went to Rick's studio, which was over at the No Dial rehearsal space, and between Rick and I early on and Matt, we just made more songs. And that's kind of turned into the Unhinged stuff a little bit. And that came out on cassette tape on these like laser embossed cassette tapes. And then eventually I'd heard it's supposed to come out into this year, first of next year on a split LP.
Cool.
But, and that was kind of just like, well, I guess I need to get a band together. But Rick was real quick to tell me that he didn't like want to do it like that, you know?
Yeah.
He had like his own obligations. So if it was just, we probably could still do it if it was just him recording and writing and doing that. But I couldn't really count on him for live shows or touring.
Yeah.
So Matt decided he would do it for a while, and I had the guitar player of Hex Machine for a couple of years. And we did a couple tours with that, went to New York and back, went out to Texas and back. That's who played on the South by Southwest thing. And then I felt like Matt was becoming a permanent member, and I had sort of like started fishing around for a guitar player, and I got the guitar player of Seahorse, and he had also been in Vaz, which was that Hammerhead side project. I don't know if you've ever heard them.
No.
You should check them out. And he agreed to come down from Minneapolis and go with us to Kyle of Harvey Milk Studio. And that was the This Is Late record.
Yeah. It's a great record. And it's got a, I guess, kind of a sequel to a song from Grids on there, like Kansas Part 2 or...
Yeah. Well, kind of took it and made it more of a medley out of it.
Yeah.
It was kind of like a last minute, like in the studio. Thinking back, I shouldn't have put it on the record.
I like it though. I think that's actually one of my favorite ones on the record.
Is it really?
Yeah.
It was just kind of one of those things where everybody was like, "Oh, you should do this," because I helped write that song, and I sort of made it different than the. Listen to the Kansas song on the Grids record.
Yeah.
And it's totally different.
Yeah, I was listening to that's what I was noticing when I was listening to it earlier, and I think the thing I like about that song is just because the things you say, it's just like you're kind of just spouting off these things that maybe piss you off or just whatever, and it's just I just love it. It's just kind of awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that record was very cathartic, but it's hard to play now for me.
Yeah.
Like that song Work. My dad owned this company, and he had a partner, and I kind of got screwed over basically out of a job as a result of all this. So basically my dad dying sort of worked myself right out of a job. And that song is kind of like my retaliation to that. And it's weird, and it's kind of like when I guess I had never done this before. You write a song like that, and then the farther you distance yourself from that situation, it's weirder to go back and revisit.
Yeah.
And some of those songs we've never played live because normally play for like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all people want to hear anyway.
Exactly. We take the same philosophy.
Yeah. People don't want to hear all that. And I wrote that song on that Unhinged, Today I Will Not Kill Myself. So I found this thing at a thrift store, and it looked like a cigarette pack, and it was plastic and it was black.
Yeah.
And I pressed the button, and it was a recorded voice, and it said, "Today I will not kill myself."
Oh, wow.
And then you just basically held the button down, and it just kept doing it over and over again. And so I was like, okay, well, this is $1. I'm buying this.
Absolutely.
So it had like an 1/8" plug. And so I put it into the thing, and I was like, you know what? I'll just loop this, and we'll just play over this. And my friend, unbeknownst to me, that was playing with us at the time, that was in Seahorse, he's like, man, that song hits a little too close to home for me. I just want to tell you. And I don't know if he knew someone who's tried to commit suicide or he's had weird feelings, but I could see where it really pushes people into a real awkward, weird spot.
I can see that.
And a lot of that, I get off on because I want people to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I wanted powertake0ff to be like, I saw the Swans quite a few times, and they were notorious for turning the heat up to over 100 inside the building.
Yeah.
And they used to like lock the doors so people couldn't get out. And they were just in there and they were torturing you. And I kind of wanted it to be that. I mean, I know I catch a lot of shit from people here in town that are like, oh man, it's too fucking loud. That's ridiculous. PAs are too good now. Yeah, okay. But I don't ever know about the guy running the PA is my question. And secondly, what's wrong with being loud?
Yeah.
Like, even if a PA was great, do you think the Who would have still been quiet? I mean, there was just if you're going to play this music, play it, and it's not for everybody, I mean, if you want to play Bell and Sebastian, go play Bell and Sebastian. But I choose not to do that, nothing against them, but that's not me.
Yeah. And I said on the podcast before, and I don't remember what it was in reference to or what it was, but like, I always felt like anything that kind of put you on the edge or made you a little bit uncomfortable, there was something great about that. There's something really cool about that. And especially like with that, and I've seen you guys play. I can't even remember. I was trying to think of who it was you played with. I saw you guys at the Milestone one time, and it was so loud that at one point I had to walk out of the room. But I was in the next room going, man, these guys are badass.
Well, thank you. There was some weird shows at the Milestone. Like, we opened for that Street Sex band. Were you at that show?
I don't think it was that one.
That's the band that basically fogged up the entire room with dry ice smoke, and they used a chainsaw with no blade on it.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't at that one.
And when you went outside the Milestone, like, just because the Milestone's not sealed up, it looked like it was weeping. Like smoke was coming out of like every orifice imaginable. They sounded like Ministry.
Yeah. And
we played with them, and they were like, dude, we were always told how loud we are. They had this monster PA, and they were also playing through the Milestone PA. But I told them, I was like, dude, we don't have a PA. It's just all straight amplifiers, I mean, many a times our amps make it to where most PAs can't keep up.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the point. I mean, I can't sing. You don't want to hear what the hell I got to say. You want to look at it and make it seem like there's like a strained version of you're trying to like make out what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But otherwise, nobody gives a shit, And I always say that. I mean, I try to put a lot of thought into what we do, and I know some people don't, some people do, but I honestly do try to put a lot of thought into it and make people think, make people uncomfortable. I'm sure it's been a hindrance. People probably don't want to play shows with us. People probably don't want to book us for that reason. I mean, I'm sure there's clubs in town. I've never played Tommy's.
Yeah, you could do
years
it.
ago. What's that?
I said you could definitely do it. AM/FM's played there. They're pretty loud too, and they played there, and it was a great show.
Did you ever go to the SKNet Cafe?
Yeah, I've been there before. I think I only went there once or twice, and I saw Cemetery Thieves there.
So Horse Thief played there in like 2004.
Yeah.
And I brought Dove to town, and they came to town with full stacks, and there was a band from Boston called Fat Day and Kalabi Yao, which was Bo White's band.
Yeah.
The best part about that was the lights rattled out of the fixtures in the ceiling, and they freaked out. Like, you didn't tell us it was going to be this loud.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I know this is a coffee shop / internet cafe, but I was just looking for a place to do a show.
Yeah.
Because back then there were just sparse places to play. That's where it all kind of started, as far as like having a place where we just, every band we've been in, I mean, Grids was loud, but it was controlled, you know,
Mm-hmm.
2 half stacks, and I had a really loud bass rig. But now with Power Takeoff, it's always a stereo guitar rig and a stereo bass rig.
Yeah.
And, you know, now, I don't know. I mean, I've even thought about getting a drum machine and going that route and making it like a more demented Big Black, if that's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what holds for, I mean, everybody's like, when you said earlier about the lineups, it's always just been me.
Yeah.
And then it's just, you know, been other people involved, just when I could get them. Like that split 7-inch, you know, with Multicult. That thing came about because we toured together, and really, truly, I've never toured with a band before that I really liked.
Yeah.
Like, there's always been somebody in the band I didn't care for, or maybe didn't really care for the band and really like the people.
Mm-hmm.
That was like across the board a win-win.
Yeah.
Like, I that was very sad when that was over, and we decided, well, let's just immortalize it into a split 7-inch.
Yeah.
And that's literally how that came about.
Yeah, and I dig both sides of that 7-inch too.
Did you get to see them when they played at the station?
No, I didn't.
They were good, man. They were really, really, like, just real, so precise with all their time changes and everything.
Yeah.
They're just, if you ever get a chance to see them, they're a really, really good band.
Oh, yeah, I'll be looking out for them.
I guess at this point, you know, I always try to make shit count. You know, I mean, watching my dad die so abruptly and watch my sister die, I'm like, shit, I only got one chance at this.
Yeah.
So whatever it is I'm doing, I want to make it count. I don't know. I've never yearned to be a rock star. I guess more than anything, just be appreciated for what I do, you know?
Yeah. I think, you know, when I was a kid, I thought I wanted to be a rock star. But once I realized I was going to play punk rock, it was like, no, I just want to be able to do what I want to do and have people enjoy it. And
right.
I don't care about being, I mean, I still joke that I'd like to be bigger than the Rolling Stones, but, you know, who wouldn't? But I still just want to play music.
Well, I'm friends with the Avett brothers, you know, growing up here in Concord.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I want to be. I mean, they can't go to Lowe's by themselves. You know, I mean, they can't go out to dinner and shit. I mean, they're not like, you know, the Rolling Stones, but they're still the big band.
Yeah, especially around here.
Regionally. And, you know, so then it's kind of like, what are you willing to give up and sacrifice? You know, for me, I've always said, if Power Takeoff or anything that I do, music endeavor wise, can pay for itself.
Yeah.
And that's all, you know, when you start quantifying it that way, that's, you know, that's pretty much what the band has done.
Mm-hmm.
I front the band some money to go on tour or record, and then I pay myself back.
Yeah.
But when this thing starts costing me a bunch of money, I might be like, I don't know. Maybe I'm going to move on. You know, because then you find out, how long do you want to do this? You know, when you're like printing shirts and nobody's buying them.
Yeah.
You know, and you got like a box of shirts and shit. You know, that's when you start thinking about, well, I don't know. I mean, got to rethink all this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I've always wondered as a kid, even, and then as I get older, like, if there's still a place for me doing this around here, you know?
Yeah.
And I guess it'll just keep going, you know, because theoretically, I guess Power Takeoff could just be a recording project.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that have went that way these days too.
Yeah, I mean, if I can't find people to play with, I mean, there's plenty of people playing guitar, there's plenty of people doing everything, but I like to find people that have their own rigs. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't have big rigs anymore, amp-wise, and I find a lot of people around here just really can only do like one band, maybe two at the most. And you can't stretch somebody like super thin. I don't know. It's just, I ask myself that a lot. And then I also think, like, do I need to be more involved now after COVID? Like, really trying to help promote the scene and maybe in turn promoting myself musically, put myself back out there. I feel like it's just, I think our world in general, the older you get, the less serious you're taken. Mm-hmm. and I'm sure to some kid, I'm just some big fucking blowhard, and like, what do I know?
I wonder that sometimes myself, like with the things that I'm doing. I'm like, I think the stuff that I'm doing is kind of important, but and some of my friends do too. But once it gets beyond that, do people really even care what I'm doing?
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think you definitely understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it's a weird feeling, because sometimes when we would play, I'd have some kid come up and be like, "Oh man, some guy said I should talk to you about amps." Well, I'm not like the amp guru, but I mean, I could definitely probably answer your question. Yeah, it sounds like you need to take it to the shop. Sounds like there's something wrong with it. And a lot of people around here, I mean, got all these amps that they're just messing around with that are broken and don't work right. Mm. And me, I'm just anal about my shit. I take it and get it fixed.
Yeah.
So I have to have everything working properly. But I don't know. I'm really curious to see where Charlotte comes out of all this.
Me too. I think on the other side of all this, that's the one big thing is I'm hoping for certain things, but I really I have no idea. And I'm hoping that on the other side of it, people at least still appreciate what we're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I know one thing we have a great record store. Mm-hmm. And there's some other places to get records. When Charlotte didn't have a record store, like when Milestone Records closed in the early 90s, and then before that time between it and Manifest, man, it was weird around here. Mm-hmm. I feel like the heart of a scene is a record store. I kind of always used to think, well, there's no publications now. And I guess that's maybe not the worst thing in the world, because I think the only thing left in like the Triangle's the Independent up there, that magazine. And really, I mean, Creative Loafing's nothing, and the Queen City Nerve, it's not like they talk about music.
No,
the Observer used to. I mean, there's no like music writers, so to speak, who are, I don't know if it's that you would consider them a tastemaker, but they at least would sort of. When I was a kid around here, there was a guy named Fred Mills.
Yeah, I remember.
And he wrote for like Magnet and Alternative Press, and he wrote for the Observer and Creative Loafing. But I learned a lot from him. Mm-hmm. He would be like, you know what, I'm going to interview this band, and I'm going to make sure it gets out there so people can read about it. I don't know where that happens now, unless you're like reading it on the internet, because there are no zines really to speak of or anything.
Yeah, I mean, that's one reason why when I started this project, I brought back the zine, the part of it as well, which I've done one issue. I'm just about finished with the second one, or well, it'll be the fourth one, but that's if you count the first two way back 23 years ago. It's a lot of work, and I would love to do it maybe on a bigger scale, but when I'm just doing it for myself, it's kind of hard to get motivated to get it all together.
Yeah.
And just knowing that people don't really appreciate, or that print media is basically dying out. So I don't say that people don't appreciate it. I think it's a niche market for sure. But, I wish more people were doing it.
But I remember as a kid, I would always find these zines. Mm-hmm. Everybody was doing zines and stuff. And I kind of would love for that to come back in some weird way. Like, I mean, my question has been, the past 6 months, like, well, I know what I've been doing. I've been writing music and remodeling this house. What the fuck's everybody else been doing? Like, if you're a writer, you've been writing? Like, are you as pissed off as me about, Trump and all the shit? Like, I had this impression in 2016 that it was going to be like this renaissance of 1982 all over again.
Yeah.
That it was like, because I remember there for a while, every record I picked up was like, fuck Reagan. Everything was like just talking about how terrible the government was.
Yeah.
And I thought that we would go back to that place, but we haven't.
Yeah.
Besides a couple like the Municipal Waste T-shirt with Ronald with the Trump blowing his brains out.
Yeah.
But then then Kathy Griffin gets in big trouble. It's like no band has said anything curt or weird, or nobody's written like the ultimate protest song.
Yeah.
it was funny. I was listening to this comp the other day, and I don't even know which one it was, but it's from the 80s. And like 2 seconds into it, you hear some guy in the back scream, "Fuck Reagan," like really loud. And you're like, well, I know this came out in the early 80s, you know, but I just don't know if that shit's like happening now or not happening.
I think there's a lot of reasons for, because I remember when Trump first took office, there were a lot of people saying, "Oh, well, there'll be some great punk rock songs written over the next few years." And I haven't seen it, but I think a lot of people shy away from politics these days, and I understand why. Yeah. But you know, I kind of miss that a little bit. I noticed there are plenty of fuck Trump songs on Spotify that are hip hop songs, so maybe that's where it's going to now. And I was talking to Sunday Boxing recently, and we were talking about like, rock and roll is not the rebel music anymore. It's like hip hop is a rebel music. No. So I guess that's where it's went to.
No, and I got to tell you, one thing I like about what your podcast and everything is that you're wanting to like go backwards and find some of the missing links of the music for like regionally. Yeah. You know, like, you know, playing the Erectus Monotone, playing the Vanilla Trainwreck, Trucker, Regrate, all that stuff. There's so much, like, I feel like people around here locally don't, like, even give a nod to that. Yeah. And I don't know if they realize how great it was in North Carolina between 1990 and 2000.
Yeah, it really was. And that's one of the reasons why I started the whole project. Well, part of the project, and especially the radio side of it. I was like, man, I don't want, you know, I love these songs. I still, you know, will put Picasso Trigger on any day and listen to them. But how many people have just completely forgotten they existed?
Yeah, I mean, like Fred Hutchison is a guy you should talk to.
No, definitely, he's on my list.
But like, you know, because Fred was in Boyle. Mm-hmm. Fred was in 30-Foot Beast.
Yep, played in Subculture.
He was in Buzz Oven. Yeah, like he did like the Buzz Oven demos. Yeah, that led into Buzz Oven. Sewer Puppet, Husbands. I mean, Fred is a very, you know, one of those guys, and people don't realize he played in Subculture in the 80s. Yeah. And then like Greensboro, I think had a scene that never got enough due with like the Rebar, Raymond Break, Geezer Lake crew. Yeah. There was like the Rights Reserved, which was like more punk. Yeah. And then they became Eagle Bravo. There was a lot of really, really good bands that, and of course I always kind of tipped my hat to the Raleigh scene. Yeah. It just seemed to like click for me. They seemed like people that were like-minded people, you know? Yeah. That whole Trucker, which like morphed into Cherry Valance, and then Regraped was around during that time. And then, you know, of course they did like 3 tours with the fucking Champs after they moved to Portland. But I appreciate that you're like going back and replaying that stuff because I'm sure a lot of the people that log into your you know, your podcast or your thing, they don't know who those bands are. Yeah, you know, but they were definite players. You know, at a very good time to live here. You know.
Oh yeah, the early 90s. Well, like you said, basically 90s through the 2000. It was a really, really good time for music in this whole state. And well, North and South Carolina combined, but really in North Carolina.
I mean, Columbia had an amazing punk scene. Mm-hmm. You know, like it all kind of started with Anti-Schism.
That's why I was sure to throw South Carolina in there as well, because it would really, you know, Anti-Schism, 134. I'm trying to think of who else. Inhumanity,
and then the Guy in a Punchline. Yep. Yeah, that's another person you should talk to is Chris Bickle.
Yeah, I was thinking about just earlier today. I said I need to send Chris an email, tell him it's time.
yeah, he, you know, because he's a guy that, you know, for lack of whatever, he's kind of Mr. Columbia. Yeah. You know, he's never left since he went to college. I think he went in like 88 or 89.
I think he's been there for like about over 30 years now. And
and he's a huge integral part of that music scene down there. You know, and I guess, you know, there was so much underground music back then, you know. It was just a different time. Yeah. You know, the internet, I remember watching it slowly change everything, you know. And like, I hate it for people that didn't get to live through Fat City here in Charlotte. Yeah. That was just, you try to describe it to people, and I don't do it any justice.
That was an awesome place. I had so many good shows there too, but just a really awesome place.
I mean, I don't know, like, Charlotte's had its moments, I just don't know. I'm scared of where it's going in the future with all the heavy gentrification that's going on. That's the thing that scares me the most, you know. I've always lived in Concord since I've been back. I never chose to live in Charlotte. I kind of like my space and sort of respect my space. And then now I've got a lot of space during COVID. But I don't know. I'm thankful I don't live in Charlotte and have to be all on top of people right now.
Me too. I mean, that's one thing is I love this area. I love, you know, Charlotte, for better or worse. I love the town. You know, there's times when I hate it, but I like being farther away from it. I like having my space. And
yeah, I have a car. I can go when I need to go, and then when it's time to get back, I can get in my car and leave.
There are times when I'm like, man, I really wish I lived closer, but you know, overall, I'm pretty happy where I'm at.
It's funny to think of all the times we were at the same show, and you would get on 85 to go south, and I would get on 85 to go north for our 30-minute drives to opposite directions. I wanted, like, when I did the This Is Late record, this is a funny little story about that. They did the record, sent it in, got it pressed. Then I got a call that said, hey, man, there's something wrong with the record. And I said, oh, shit, what's wrong with it? They're like, well, when the bass kicks in, the needle jumps off the record.
Whoa.
I said, what? And they're like, yeah, it just comes completely up in the air. And I was like, oh, shit, man, we probably like pushed the bass too hard. We were mastering it. And I guess somewhere cutting the lacquers, it got lost in translation. And the record was basically unlistenable. Mm-hmm. Had to be cut again. Had to go back in and redo and adjust it to where when the bass kicked in, it didn't just pop the needle off the record, which was cool. I wanted to do that, but I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to cost somebody extra money, you know, and because I'm always looking for a way to like fuck with people, like putting lock groove or something at the end of a record or at the very beginning, to where that way once they're in it, they're just stuck in it. Just goes in and goes out. But
this has been a Gabba Gabba Hunt Media production.